I'm Chef Frank, this is Protocooks, and today we're going to make a delicious quiche with some Cambozola cheese. Quiche. Always brings back so many memories for me. When I was a kid, and I'm a child of the 80s, quiche was kind of a big thing, and my parents used to make it often. So I grew up in an Italian house, and food was always at the forefront. We talked about food all the time. Dinners were a family affair. My parents even got Gourmet magazine, which was pretty big back then. It's no longer in print, and it was amazing. I loved reading Gourmet magazine. And I'm guessing that's where the push for quiche came from Gourmet magazine. Even to this day, my dad says something's good, it's gourmet. Not only is quiche delicious, it's super adaptable. You can put pretty much whatever you want in it. Some people use it as a way to use up leftovers. Some people just like to mess around with different flavors. And that's what quiche is great at. You can put whatever you want in it, and it's usually going to be delicious. The other thing that I love about it is that it is do ahead. You do it ahead. You can make a bunch of quiches for a party, you can freeze them, you can put them in the fridge, and all you gotta do is warm them up and you can eat them. And if you don't want them warm, you can even eat them cold. I like it cold. I recently went down to Florida to visit my parents, and of course my mom had a quiche. One of my favorite ones that she makes, it's pepperoni and artichoke hearts. It sounds strange, but that's pretty much what I ate when I was in Florida. I think I might have eaten the whole thing, and it's absolutely delicious. For my quiche, this is what you're gonna need. All-purpose flour, Cambozola cheese, eggs, heavy cream, butter, sugar, some sort of fried onion garnish, salt, and pepper. Before we start cooking, I want to take a minute to talk about our sponsor, Cambozola cheese. If you've never had Cambozola, you got to go out to your supermarket and find it. It is an indispensable part of this recipe. The cheese is a bloomy white rind cheese with really mild blue hints. It's super creamy, super delicious. Cambozola is not only great for cheese boards, I use it in a lot of different recipes. It's one of those ingredients I keep on going back to. It's almost like a crave. Once you have a little bite, you're like, yeah, I really like that. I think I want a little bit more. And it's always really good in recipes. I use it in compound butters, flatbreads, in salads. You can just kind of crumble it on top of a salad. No matter which way you use it, you're going to be happy. It's creamy, it's delicious, it's velvety, and even if you don't like blue, you will love this cheese. Cambozola pairs well with dry sausage. You can put it on your charcuterie board, dry fruits, figs, even fresh fruits, and it's something that I really like to have a glass of beer with. I am not a wine drinker, but I always go for a beer, and what better to pair it with than a nice Bavarian beer that's dark and brown. Thank you, Cambozola, for sponsoring this video, and I want to thank you for your support of my channel. I really appreciate it. Keep making the great cheese. First thing I'm going to do is make my crust, and what I like to do is make a double batch. I'll use one half of the recipe today, and then I'll freeze the other half so I have dough ready to go if I want to make a quiche on a moment's notice. One of the most important parts of making a pastry dough is trying to keep everything cold. My butter's cold, my egg yolks are cold, I have some ice water to bring this dough together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some salt because we need seasoning. I'm gonna add some sugar, and even though this isn't a sweet recipe, I like that the sugar adds a little complexity to the dough. And then I'm just gonna mix this up. So when it comes to getting the butter into our dough, first of all, we want it really cold. Second of all, we want it in really small pieces. And instead of dicing it, I like to use a cheese grater on the rough side here. It gets my butter really nice and small and easy to cut into my flour. So make sure your butter's cold and just grate it in. So this makes the butter pieces really small, and it gives us a nice flaky crust. We just toss this in the flour. Try not to get it too warm with your hands, but we want to make this so it's kind of pea-sized pieces of butter in our flour. And I just like to crumble it up with my hands. So you can see that my butter is breaking up, and I have like nice little chunks of butter kind of mixed in throughout the dough. Butter is cut in. I'm gonna get my egg yolks. I'm not using any whites, and I'm just gonna add a couple of tablespoons of cold water to that, and I'm gonna mix it up. Make sure you break that yolk up really nice. Now the key here is not to put too much water in. Too much water in activates gluten and makes our pastry crust tough. I'm gonna just add the egg yolks and water mixture, and I'm just gonna start tossing it together and see where we're at. I'm just gonna add a little more water. I can tell that it just needs a little more, right? Just to start bringing it together. Get rid of my fork and get one of these nice pastry blenders and kind of chop it in. And this is how I'm going to determine if I have enough water in here. what I'll do is, after I chop this in, chopping in is not kneading, right? So I'm not forming any gluten. Chop it in, take a bunch of dough, squeeze it together, right? Now, as I touch this, it kind of crumbles. It's not really holding together all that well, so it crumbles really easily. So I'm gonna add just a little more water. And this is kind of a feel thing at this point. You wanna feel that the dough is going to come together when we kind of mush it together. All right, I think that I'm good there. You can see that it's starting to come together. So let me get this out onto the counter. And what I like to do is this, just start squeezing it together, right? Not necessarily kneading, just squeeze it together so the dough starts to come together. So just start squeezing it together so that it comes into one big mass. And that's my dough. And what I'm gonna do with this right now is I'm gonna split it in half. Okay? So half for now, half for later. Dough is split in half. I got my plastic wrap. I get a nice piece of plastic wrap. I take my ball of dough, put it in there, fold my wrap over, leave some space, and then I smush it down, right? So make sure there's some space in your plastic wrap. I kind of find that starting with a disc or a flat disc is just so much easier to roll it out. So make your flat disc, wrap it, and we can chill it for about a half hour before we roll it out. The other piece, same thing. We don't have to use it today. We can leave it in the fridge for a few days, or we can freeze it. Just make sure if you freeze it, you put the date on it. That's the one thing that I always mess up is I make it, I'm like, it's in the fridge for a few months and I forget when I made it. So we're gonna take these two pieces of dough, we're gonna throw them in the fridge, let them chill, and then we can roll it out. So my dough is out of the fridge. It's rested for about a half hour. You could freeze it at this point. You can leave it in the fridge for a day or two, but the gluten is relaxed. It's gonna be easy to roll. All right, so I have a pie dish. I am using a glass pie dish. If you don't have glass, you could use metal. I'm not gonna even get into the argument of glass or metal is better. I have a good result with glass, and that's what I have. So use what you got. So let me set this aside. I have a little bit of bench flour. I'm gonna dust my table, take my crust out, unwrap, right onto my table. Make sure this is floured up. We can always brush the flour off later on. We just don't want it to stick. So don't be afraid to be generous with the flour. We'll just brush it off before we put it into our pan. Now, whenever I roll from the center out, give it a quarter turn, center out. I never go over the edges because that kind of crimps the edges and you get less puff. So just go to from the center out, quarter turn, center out until you get a nice circle. Now if it sticks, more flour. Don't be afraid to add more flour if it sticks. But we do want to kind of get a round piece of dough, and we're looking for about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, right? I don't want a super thick crust with this. I want crust there, but I don't want it to be super thick, and I think that's good. So I'm just gonna brush off any excess flour, and an easy way to get this into the pan is to actually fold it into a triangle, bring your dish over, put the point of the triangle into the center of your dish, and unfold. Right? And now I can start just kind of putting it into the corners of the dish. I don't go for a fancy edge. I am not fancy like that. I just make sure that the dough is sitting in the pan. It's into the corners, and that's how I like it. I get a knife, and I'm just gonna trim off the excess. You see, if I rest the knife on the edge of the dish, it gives me a nice clean line. I get a fork, and I'm gonna do something called docking. I'm just gonna put some holes in the bottom. Now, you might think, quiche, why would there be holes? It's gonna leak through. It's not gonna leak through. This just lets some of the steam, when we cook the crust, kind of blow off. It blows off the steam so that our crust doesn't puff up. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna let it rest again. I'm gonna let it rest for about 20 minutes to a half hour in the fridge. While we're waiting on the crust, let's make the filling. Now the filling is super easy. I kept this one really simple because I really want the Cambozola to shine, so I'm not going too complicated. One of the things you have to remember is that there's a ratio of liquid to eggs. It's always going to be 4 eggs to 1 cup of liquid. That's how you know the eggs will solidify the filling. Keep that ratio in your head when you're making your filling for quiche. So I'm gonna crack my eggs. I have 4 eggs. I have some cream, about 3/4 of a cup, and I'm just gonna top that off with a little bit of milk. A little bit of milk, a little bit of cream. Get that in there. Right? I'm going to hit some salt and pepper now. I go heavy on the black pepper. I just love black pepper in this. And salt. The cheese has a little salt to it, so you gotta be careful. And then I'm just gonna whisk this together so the eggs are beaten up really well and mixed really well. Break the yolks, mix them in really, really well. Now I'm gonna put in my fried onions and my Cambozola. I'm using everything, the white rind, the filling. If you don't eat the rind on bloomy white rind cheeses, give it a try. They're really delicious, right? So I'm just gonna try and break this up into small pieces. Crumble, crumble. Cheese is crumbled. Now I'm just gonna mash the cheese a little into the filling and just stir it. I don't need it to be broken up too much. I want some nice chunks in there, okay? And we're gonna let this sit until the crust is ready. My crust is chilled, it's nice and firm, it's rested for about a half hour, and what I'm gonna do now is blind bake. Blind bake is baking without the filling in there. And one of the things you have to do is weigh it down. So I have a piece of parchment paper here, and then I have some beans. I just buy beans, the cheapest ones I can find, and you can use them over and over. The only thing is once you blind bake with them, once you use them as pie weights, you can't eat them. So I just put them in a container, I label it pie weights, don't eat. You put your pie weights in, save your container, and then what I do is press it into the corners. So make sure it's weighting down all of your crust, get it into the corners, and then we can bake it. So I'm gonna bake this crust for about 15 to 20 minutes at 400 degrees. I'm gonna take the beans out and let it cook a little without the beans in there once the edge is solidified. So I get that center kind of like a little crisp so I don't have a soggy bottom. Okay, bring it to the oven and bake it off. So the crust isn't done yet. I'm just gonna let it bake without the beans for a sec, right? Because I have a nice crust, it's starting to get brown, but I want the inside to cook a little more so that it kind of holds up better to the liquid. Back in the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes. All right, my crust is ready to go. What's great about this is I do not need to chill this. It's just out of the oven, I'm gonna put my filling in and I can bake it right away. This is ready, let's get our filling. Get that filling in there. Let's also make sure that when you put this into the crust, that try and get that filling spread out nice and evenly. Don't let all the cheese just kind of lump in the middle. Get it to the edges too. I lower the oven to 350 and now I'm gonna bake this for 20 to 25 minutes. All right, it is done. Look at this. Now, the way that I determine if it's done or not, I like to see a little bit of wiggle, but it also is firm, right? So you see it's wiggle, but not a lot. If it's wiggling a lot and it's sloshy, leave it in for a little longer, but this was about 20, 22 minutes. You may be tempted to cut into this right now. Bad idea, it's gonna be a mess. It's gonna be like a puddle. What you wanna do is let it chill completely and then cut it. You don't want to cut it while it's super hot. What's great about this is that once it's cold, you can always reheat it. It reheats really well. So I'm gonna let this chill and then we're gonna taste. All right, now is my favorite time. It's time to taste. I'm gonna cut it down the middle. I like to cut it down the middle on both ways. So I have 4/4, and then it's a lot easier to slice into reasonable slices. Oh my gosh, my crust is nice and crispy. I like that. And let's get a slice out. I'm gonna choose you. Okay. Oh my Lord. Look at that. Look at that slice of quiche. So when you look at this, you can see that the eggs look nice and creamy and not curdled. That's how I know it's cooked right. And I think the crust looks really great. We got some nice browning on the crust. The bottom crust is always a little lighter, but I am really happy with that. All right, let's give this a taste. I'm gonna get right here. The crust tastes beautiful. The filling is creamy, lightly blue from that nice Cambozola cheese. The onions just accent that nice cheesiness. And this is the thing I love about this. Quiche is versatile. You can put whatever you want in it. It's versatile because you can take it with you on trips. You can put it in a little bag and eat it in the car. You can make it for brunch. You can make it for breakfast. You can make it for dinner with a side salad. It's just one of those things that once you get the technique down and once you kind of know how to do it, it is actually really easy to do and it's versatile. You can use it anywhere. So learn how to make quiche and people will quiche you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We have merch in the description down below. We have a P.O. box down there as well. I want to thank our Patreon patrons for supporting us. Thank you so much. And I want to give a special thanks to Cambozola Cheese for sponsoring this video. Love your cheese. Love the things it does in my recipes. I'm Chef Frank. This is Protocooks. I hope you enjoy our quiche. Have a good one.